adapt to this new world.
Right. So the first thing you have to do is you have to look at what lies ahead if we do nothing.
Right.
So the way it's going to play out is that self-driving trucks are slowly going to start hitting the highways. Amazon's testing them out right now. And the first stage is going to be that there's a human driver just sitting there as a fail-safe, and the truck's going to drive itself. Now, my friends in Silicon Valley are working on teleoperators, which is, so the trucks have right now like a 98% accuracy level, which is not very high because you can't have 2% semi-trucks like running into things.
You always take the time.
Where to?
Duke.
Duke it is. Duke in Virginia. You're on with Jenna and Matt.
Afternoon. How's everybody today?
Great. How are you?
Fat, dumb, and happy.
What did you say? Unhappy?
Fat, dumb, and happy. It's.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of me. I'm also old, so that gives me an extra bonus.
There you go.
All right. So I guess you saw the question.
I'm looking at it now.
Correct?
I posted a video this past week or week before about whether or not there's evidence for God, and I gave an example about me killing a fictional person named Steve and what counts as evidence and what doesn't, and you wanted to address that?
Well, in some respect, but I'd kind of like to take a different approach. As you know,
Sure.
My question is, in your scenario, Matt kills Steve, and then you point out if Matt exists, then that is evidence that it happened. So what I really want to get to is, without the evidence, what other evidence do you have? Let's say that Steve was killed, but Matt doesn't exist. There has to be some other explanation for how Steve got killed, correct?
Yep.
Pretty good.
Okay. So this is my only objection to the atheist debates, and I got to say you're among my favorite of the celebrity atheists out there, commenting on your videos frequently.
Already been up. Went to the gym, took a shower, had some breakfast. I started a stream one time already, and my internet dropped it. I started a stream last night. That shit got dropped. Started a stream this morning. It got dropped. So I just started this back up. And chilling. I gotta go to work in a little while. Only thing is my allergies are messing with me like so bad right now.
Almost as if you were reading my comments, because I'd always wanted to call the show and say, you are aware that there is evidence for God. You don't have to accept it, but it does exist. But you've acknowledged that.
No. In the context of there's anecdotal evidence and stuff, yes. But the whole point of that video was, once upon a time, I would, like a lot of other atheists, glibly say, oh, there's no evidence for God. And then the pedantic people would come along and say, well, there's testimonial and anecdotal evidence, and that's actually evidence. And I would say, yes,
right. And you
but it's
have
not
to accept that evidence.
But it's not good enough evidence. It's not sufficient evidence. But the truth is, the whole point of that video was to say that I may have in fact been wrong. And it may in fact be fair to say there is no evidence for the proposition God exists. Because the type of...
It may be fair to say that. However, what I'm seeking here is an alternative.
An alternative to what?
Well, to the question is, let's take, say, the Oxford Dictionary of God. The monotheistic Christian God is defined as the creator. He's defined as the source of all moral authority. A creator of the universe, by the way, which I would guess incorporates everything in the universe, and is considered the supreme being. So let's start with creator. It's fine to say that you don't believe there is a creator God, or there's not sufficient evidence, but my argument is much the same. I don't find sufficient evidence to an alternative.
It's tough.
So if
tough.
God did not create the universe, how did it come to exist?
We don't know.
You don't know.
We don't know. But so,
if the right answer,
any alternative? I mean, really, do you have any evidence that supports an alternative?
Well, we have Big Bang cosmology that explains the process as best we can understand, but that's not the same question. The issue here.
There are four different.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
of how that happens. So none of them are confirmed.
Duke, it doesn't matter. There's no. Okay. Let's say somebody's murdered, and we don't know who did it. but somebody suspects that the butler did it. Are we reasonable in concluding that the butler did it?
Not without investigating.
Okay, so now we have a
If you
unit.
investigate it, you find that it doesn't look like the butler did it, then do you stop there or
No.
you go find an alternative explanation?
You keep exploring to the best of your ability, but you do realize that some murders go unsolved forever, right? Because there's just an inability for us to. Okay, so now we have a
The
universe.
question of God will go on unsolved forever unless God reveals himself too.
Cool. So
Right, that's what we're waiting for.
I take it then. I take it, Duke. I take it then, with that statement from you, that you also don't believe in God, correct?
No, not at all. All I'm suggesting is,
No, not at all.
if you disagree with the prospect that there is a creator God, what evidence do you have for an alternate explanation?
I don't need any evidence for an alternative. Saying I don't believe something does not put a burden on me to come up with alternate explanations.
No, it doesn't, but it makes no sense, and this is the point.
It makes all the sense. You already agreed that it makes sense.
At least anecdotal evidence or minimal evidence over somebody who has no evidence.
Duke, your position is essential. Duke, your position is nobody can know whether or not the butler did it until the butler reveals himself. But I'm going to believe the butler did it anyway. That's your position.
Yeah, but we're talking about different things. We're talking about the demise of Steve. But that's not really what the question about God is. But it's not.
We have a universe.
It's the origin. So
we have a universe.
Steve analysis. Let's say Steve exists, but Steve's parents don't exist. How did Steve come to exist?
Okay, I don't need. No, Duke, stop.
Because there is some evidence.
Duke,
there is
stop.
a sufficient belief.
I don't need a bullshit hypothetical about a person existing without parents. That doesn't do any of us any good. For you to even suggest something.
The analogy doesn't really work either.
The Steve analogy does work, and you've already actually acknowledged that without supporting evidence, it's unwise and unwarranted to reach a conclusion.
And it's unwise to just walk away and assume and just say, well, the butler didn't do it. So
Duke,
who walked away?
Did you listen to the last call?
Who did it? Duke.
Did you listen to the last call?
Portion of it, I was actually watching TV waiting for you to come on.
Well, if you had been paying attention, you would have heard us point out how absolutely bullshit it is to suggest that we have just walked away and ignored this. We are the ones here on a show, some of us for many, many years, continually asking, what is the evidence that the butler did it, and getting nothing but fallacies. We're not the ones walking away from this. The people who are in intellectual jeopardy here are not those of us who are saying present the evidence. It's the people who are saying we believe the butler did it, but we can't present any evidence for it. Those are the people who are being unreasonable.
And not only that, but you have to believe the butler did it too.
No, I don't necessarily have to believe the butler did it, because that's just a proposition. The butler did it.
Yeah, God created is also just a proposition.
If something else did it. If Steve is killed and the butler doesn't exist, or the butler didn't do it, there has to be an alternate explanation.
How do you know Steve didn't have a heart attack?
What I'm trying to get from atheists is some alternate explanation.
Tough.
What alternate explanation is there?
I don't know how many times.
I don't have sufficient evidence to support an alternate explanation.
You don't have sufficient evidence to support your preferred explanation. So you have a preferred explanation without sufficient evidence.
How is your?
Shut up. You have your preferred explanation without sufficient evidence, and you're looking at everybody else going, do you have any other alternatives? Whether or not people present other alternatives is irrelevant to what the truth is and what one is warranted to believe. So do you have evidence for your preferred? Oh my God, you talked all the way through that. Goodbye. I'm not letting you do that to Jenna on her first date.
Thank you.
You don't get to just sit there and talk through, listen to the TV through the other call that already answered your questions and then talk through while I'm trying to explain. Hooray.
So,
by the way, as a reminder before we go on to the next call, this show is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You're welcome to come down if you are an atheist or atheist-friendly person. Visit the building not only while the shows are gone, but 11 to 9, 7 days a week, and there'll be dinner here after the show. If you're around, come on down.
yay.
Yay. I just occasionally have to throw out old-style announcements.
It's helpful.
It was funny because looking back on the show, like 15 or so years ago when I started, and Ashley Perrigan was the host. Hi. You come down and hang out anytime you want, Ashley. But there was almost a script for the intro, and so they all sounded exactly the same. And for whatever reason, I just memorized it and went with it. I thought this is the intro you have to use, and so my brain was like, "Hey, welcome to the Atheist Experience. It's sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, nonprofit educational blah blah blah." And then I realized someday, I don't have to say that word for word every time. Being a free thinker allows me to float around and throw it in late in the show or whatever. But where are we going now?
Tonight was BYOB, but you brought something more. Yes, it was your favorite wine, but it was also proof that you were listening. For all the BY...
George in Dunmore, how are you?
Hello?
Hey.
Yes, Matt and Tracy.
Yeah,
I
thanks
would
for
like
waiting.
to ask a question, if I may, and that is how the faith of an atheist differs from the faith of a theist, in your opinion. Now, you say that faith is gullibility, yet everyone has faith in something.
No, they don't.
Including yourselves.
No, they don't.
I disagree, sir. Everybody has faith in
Well, you
something.
can disagree all day long, but I'm going to tell you what I mean by faith and why I don't have it. Faith is the excuse people give for believing in something when they don't have a good reason. If you have a good reason to believe in something, you don't need to make appeals to faith.
Well, saying to have a good reason, that is an opinion, I believe. If you say, I have a good reason to believe in this, that's your opinion. I might think differently.
Yes, of course you could, but you could also be wrong.
Yes, and so could you.
Correct. So how do we go about determining which of us is actually right?
Well, that's my question. You say that the faith of a theist is gullibility.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, no, not the faith of a theist. I just said faith is gullibility. Doesn't mean it applies to theists. There are people who have faith in things like psychic healers and homeopathy and all sorts of other things, and that's also gullibility. And it is countered by education and appeal to actually good, demonstrable standards of evidence.
Well, now, if you don't know something for a fact, do you not have faith in it if you believe it to be true?
When you say for a fact, are you saying anytime I'm not absolutely certain, am I using faith?
Yes.
No, I'm not using faith. There are plenty of things that we're not absolutely certain about, but we have reasonable levels of confidence based on good evidence. The fact that I might exercise inductive reasoning and might not be correct or might not be absolutely certain is irrelevant.
And what do you think of the faith of someone who believes in God, who has faith that there is God and there are miracles? What do you think about that faith?
It's gullibility.
And yes, now they have the same confidence in the things that they believe in as you do.
Yeah, the difference
so why is their faith gullibility?
The difference is that I don't need any faith for the things that I believe in. My views, whether they are absolute certainty or not, which absolute certainty is virtually non-existent, are based on evidence that is demonstrable, investigated, falsifiable, things like that.
Well, if I could use an example, and I will use gravity as an example.
Sure.
Do you not have faith that gravity exists, or do you know for a fact?
Can you see? Are you watching the TV?
No.
Oh, because I'm holding the pin up in front of my face.
Yes.
And I just let it go and it fell. That's a clear. If anybody's God was even half as demonstrable as what I could do with this pin to demonstrate the truth of gravity, we would never be having these conversations.
Well, now,
you don't get to pretend that faith in God is equivalent to the faith in watching a pin drop. Those aren't the same things. They're not
I
in
don't
the same
understand
ballpark.
why they're not the same things.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not getting here, because you've demonstrated that when you let go of a pen, it's going to fall.
Yes.
You have not demonstrated gravity. You have not proven that gravity was the cause of that.
Oh, that's where you're wrong. Is gravity is the descriptive label that we put on that activity.
That force.
That apparent
Gravity
force.
has an actual definition.
Yes.
How do you know that that is what is actually causing the pen to fall?
Well, I'm not saying what is causing the pen to fall. I'm describing a phenomenon.
Do you believe it is gravity which is causing the pen to
See,
fall?
you're using gravity as an entity, as a causal agent, and I'm using gravity as a description of what happens, the attraction of items with mass.
Right, which is gravity. So you believe that gravity exists.
I believe that bodies of mass attract each other because this is demonstrable, and we label this phenomenon.
But how do you know that it is the gravity, that it is the mass which is attracting the pen?
I didn't say it was the mass that was doing the attracting. I'm demonstrating a phenomenon.
Yes.
Okay, demonstrate a phenomenon for your God.
Miracles.
Has there been a confirmed demonstrable miracle?
Yes.
Where? When?
Well, I have seen a miracle.
Okay, how can we prove that you've seen a miracle?
Well, I don't know how I'm going to prove it to you.
Well, can you demonstrate anything close to dropping a pen?
Well, no, I'm not talking about drop. I know you can drop a pen.
Okay, well, I don't know, and neither does anybody else, that there can be miracles. As a matter of fact, every time we've investigated miracles, we've failed to confirm them.
Well, you have also failed to confirm that it is gravity which is causing the pen.
Oh my gosh, George, I just told you. Gravity is the label that we
My point is you have faith in science.
I don't. I have confidence based on demonstrable evidence.
See, now you're changing the terms around.
Yes.
I can say the same thing.
Okay,
About
your
myself.
confidence in a God. What is the evidence for that? What is the evidence that supports your confidence
Well,
in a
now
God?
when I look at the world, I see a completely different world than you see.
Clearly.
I have become aware of the existence of God. I have seen miracles.
How can you demonstrate
I have
this?
listened to the teachings of the Bible.
So
and
have
to
I.
me,
So have I.
I have been
George,
And that's
George, I used to believe that stuff. I'm familiar with the teaching of the Bible. I'm asking you, how can you demonstrate this?
I don't understand what you're asking.
I know, and that's part of the problem.
I don't
See,
understand.
the things that I believe are based on demonstrations and independent confirmation. Those sorts of things that are the result of critical thinking and scientific examination of the universe in which we inhabit.
And how is it different from my examination?
You have no science to back up your claims.
Well, why do I have to have science?
Because science is the single most consistently, demonstrably reliable pathway to discerning what we most best understand about reality. It is this process of examining evidence in the light of critical thinking to determine whether or not this evidence is sound, and the model that we've constructed from it, does it actually comport with reality? That is science. It is based on the logical absolutes, which.
But science is changing all the time.
No. You're confusing the findings of scientists using science to discover reality with
what I'm
science.
talking about is faith.
No, you're not.
I'm talking about faith.
No, you're not.
Let me bring up an example.
I've been waiting for an example since we started the call.
At one point, it was believed that the universe was static.
Yes.
And even Albert Einstein believed this.
Yes.
And he thought it was foolery to suggest that the universe was in motion.
Yes, and do you know what changed people's minds?
Yes.
Evidence, not faith.
But had that evidence not come out, is it safe to say you yourself would probably today believe
I would be wrong.
in Einstein's theory? So you would be putting your faith.
No, I'm not putting faith.
Einstein.
No, you see, no.
Yes, and I don't understand the difference.
George, if you'd shut up for a second, I'll explain the difference. The difference is science doesn't tell you about truth. Science doesn't make claims of absolute certainty, and it doesn't make pronouncements about truth. What science provides you with is the best model that best explains all of the current evidence. That's it. And so the model will change as our understanding improves. So it is this is our tentative position, not our belief about truth, our tentative position about the nature of reality based on the evidence that we have. And the way we go about the model that we have improves is by exploring the universe, discovering new information, and building better models that are based on evidence. Faith does not enter into the equation at all.
Then why do you believe it? Why do you believe that the universe is in motion and as opposed to being static?
I accept the current scientific theories because
you do not believe it.
I accept the current scientific models because they are demonstrably the best models that fit the evidence. I am not saying that I believe that they are true, absolutely certain.
So why is it wrong for me to accept the things that I believe?
Because you don't have the evidence to back up your beliefs.
But I see the evidence.
It's almost like asking, it's almost like if a jury is looking at evidence for a trial and some of the jurors say, you know, all of this evidence points to this particular conclusion, and then some people say, yeah, but you know, he looks guilty to me. It's like that. And it's like asking the people who are saying that the evidence drove their conclusion to explain why their conclusion should be any less considered, less justified than the person who says he looks guilty. They think he does look guilty. So why isn't he guilty based on how he looks? Because you could be wrong by saying that he's innocent based on the evidence. So aren't those the same exact things?
Yes, but...
They're not the same exact things. No, it's not the same thing to say, I don't care about the evidence. He looks guilty to me, and that's the only evidence that matters to me, and so I'm saying guilty. And everybody else is saying, but the evidence says he's innocent. I mean, the evidence shows that he couldn't have been there, and the person saying he looks guilty is saying, well, but the evidence, you could be wrong. Well, yeah, they could, but they have to go with the evidence. And even if they're wrong, they're justified in that conclusion by the evidence, but they may be incorrect. I agree. The person saying he looks guilty is just flying blind. They're not driven by really any evidence. They're driven by this feeling that he looks a certain way, and they think that it doesn't matter that the evidence does or doesn't support it. The evidence that he looks guilty to me is sufficient.
So we've come all this way to get right back to the thing that I asked at the beginning, which is, you believe there's a God. I do not believe there's a God. We could both be wrong.
Yes.
Can I finish a sentence?
Yes.
You believe there's a God. I don't believe there's a God. We could both be mistaken. How do we go about determining which of us is most likely correct?
How do you know that you're the right one? How do you know that you're
That's what I just asked.
Right? Yes, how do you know that you're right?
That's what I just asked. What process do we use to determine whether or not you are correct? Is it just a matter of opinion?
No.
So you're making a truth claim about the universe. How do we go about determining whether or not it's true?
You need to see for yourself. You need to look at the evidence and think what it means to you.
Oh, that sounds to me a lot like the opinion that you just said it wasn't.
No, it's not an opinion.
If you just say that you have to look at it and determine what it means to you, that's called opinion.
Well, when you look at the universe, sir, you see it a certain way. Is that not your opinion?
My subjective experience of the universe is not the same as an opinion about the universe. Do I have opinions about the universe? Yes, but I don't see. You're claiming that a God exists, and I'm saying I don't believe you.
Yes,
how do we determine whether or not your claim, whether or not we should believe your claim?
Well, I could ask the same thing of you, sir.
No, you couldn't. No, you couldn't.
But you are preaching the fact that God does not exist.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And I started the show off by explaining this. I am not preaching that there is no God. Atheism is not the assertion that gods don't exist.
Then what is the
As I explained at the beginning of the show, atheism is the rejection of theistic claims. Theists assert that a God exists. Atheists do not believe that claim. Atheists do not believe that God exists. That is not the same as believing that gods don't exist.
Do you tell people that God does not exist, sir?
No.
You don't tell people that?
No, because first they have to define their God and explain why they believe that he exists before we can have a discussion. Now, how do we go about determining whether or not your claim that a God exists is true? or believable? What methodologies?
I still can't come down to the difference between the two faiths. The things that I have faith in, and the things that you have faith in, I do not see how one is gullible and one is reasonable. I
know, and that's the problem, and the demonstration of the problem.
Yes,
the demonstration of the problem is that I have asked you repeatedly, what methodology can you propose that we can use to verify independently that your claim is true, and instead of answering it, or even suggesting an answer, all you do is keep coming back to, well, you have faith too.
Well, I have answers, sir, but I know that you don't believe in those answers, and you think that they're laughable, so I don't even see the reason in bringing them up.
So your methodology is one that I would reject, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Then why on earth are you using it?
Well, because I believe it, sir. And
so it's all about opinion. Methodology is just a matter of opinion. Does your methodology have any demonstrable accuracy? Is there a way to measure how good your method is?
Tested.
Can we determine how accurate your method is?
Maybe, sir. I don't know.
Maybe? So if you don't know if you can even determine how accurate it is, why are you depending on it? Why would you depend on something that is either that you can't even determine if it's accurate? It's like using a ruler where the numbers are all over the place and you have no idea if that ruler is accurate or not, and then you're going to claim that you're convinced that it's 6 inches.
I still don't understand how you're so sure that the things that you believe in are accurate.
First of all, George, we haven't talked about how certain I am of anything. I've talked about the how and why of how we go about doing this, but you're not going to deflect this back on me when you're sitting here admitting that you don't have a demonstrably reliable method.
It's difficult to understand when I can't reflect it back on you and you won't give me your opinion.
You're the one that claims that a God exists.
And yes, and you claim he doesn't.
No, I did not claim that he doesn't, which I've already explained 3 times now. You have a burden of proof, and you need to convince people that a God exists. And I wanted to know what methodology you would use to do that. And you can offer nothing other than things that you claim that I would reject. And you also have admitted that you have no way of determining how accurate your method is.
Yes, and do you have the same to determine that he does not exist?
No, I rely on method. Oh my God, George, I did not say I determined he didn't exist. Why is this so hard for you?
Well,
I've said we're out of time now. We're completely out of time. I got to let you go. Please call again maybe next week, and we'll get into why I still haven't asserted that your God doesn't exist. You haven't even defined your God. I don't know whether or not I believe your God doesn't exist or not. Anyway, thanks to everybody who makes the show happen, and Tracy, and for being patient through all of that. Wow. For the last time, I didn't claim your God doesn't exist, but I might if you'd freaking define him.
Oh my God, what are the odds I would have rolled that?
1 in 21. Or shoot, 18. No, it's 6:30.
From Miami, you're on with Tracy and Reggie, and you want to talk about evidence for Creator.
Yeah, how are you guys doing?
Good. Thank you.
First I wanted to, you guys were talking about earlier about why God doesn't manifest himself, or why doesn't God show himself, and I just wanted to say, I think an appropriate biblical response to that would be that even if he did, people still wouldn't accept him. You see evidence of that in the Old Testament with the nation of Israel. He did manifest himself, and they still didn't believe. So just wanted to sort of...
Right, but he still manifested himself, right?
Right, but it didn't matter. They still
right, so it didn't matter, and yet God kept doing it. And all of a sudden, he doesn't do it anymore.
Well, whether I believe... whether I believe in God or not after he shows up is a different question. The first step is to show up, which he can and he will not, because I know why. But if I still disbelieve, then that's on me. But at least everybody can see that, wow, you got the evidence. and you still don't believe, then that's something that we can deal with after the fact. But the point is that I asked that question because that's like a really good way to show that you actually exist, to show up.
Right, but if God knows that regardless of whether or not he shows up, you're not going to believe, then I would say him not showing up is understandable.
No, it's not when he has a history of showing up. When he has a history of showing up, and you're saying he actually has a history of showing up repeatedly in the Old Testament, even to people that didn't believe, and even when people still didn't believe, and he's omnipotent or whatever, or omniscient and knew that they weren't going to believe, and then suddenly you're saying, well, the reason he's not showing up on your show is because you're not going to believe anyway, even though he has a history of doing exactly that.
And Jacob, how does that work? How does that work when a person shows up and I still don't believe? Like Tracy's here. How can I say to everybody, I still don't believe that you exist? She's right there. I mean, it's a done deal.
You might at that point acknowledge that he exists. You might at that point say, okay, yeah, you exist, but you wouldn't submit to his authority.
So what?
You would still be in rebellion.
So what?
I would not submit to his authority because I think he's evil, but I could not be a believer anymore because he would have showed up. It would be the same thing as if the devil shows up to you right now, would you submit to his authority?
Right, no, absolutely not, because I think he's evil.
Exactly. So it's kind of like the same thing for me.
That's my point, though. You kind of just proved my point, though, in what you just said. You think he's evil, so you, like the scripture says, you hate him. So if he shows up, what's that going to do? You're just going to tell him.
Right, but he did. I guess what I keep saying and what I keep coming back to is that your argument that this is a reason not to show up is invalidated by the fact that you already said that he did, even in these same circumstances.
How is it invalidated by him showing up in the past?
Because what you're basically saying is if you know somebody's not going to believe in you anyway, why would you show up? And it's like you'd have to ask God because he's done it.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so if it's within his character to do that, wait a minute, if it's within his character to do that, you can sit here all day and make up reasons why he shouldn't do it or wouldn't do it. But the fact is he does do it. And if he does do it, there's no reason to not do it now.
Right. Well, it's not that it's in his character to do that. He shows up in the Old Testament for specific reasons. It wasn't just him doing it because
he was asked.
He did that.
Right? He was asked to show up and prove to these unbelievers that he was God.
Yeah. Well, essentially, like I said, it just doesn't. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we can agree to disagree on that. I don't understand.
No, he did it. There's no disagreeing. He did it.
So your argument is that regardless of whether or not you would actually respond, the fact that he doesn't show up is some sort of evidence that he doesn't exist.
Right. When the tradition is that he does show up, even to non-believers, yes.
Okay. I don't know how that's a logical argument.
Can I say something real quick, Jacob? You're conflating two different things, if I may interject. The first thing is to show that he exists, so he shows up. The second thing that you're talking about is whether I would follow him, whether I like him or I don't like him. That's a separate question. If he shows up, we all will say that we believe because we have the evidence. The second question is, we will then worship. And I'm not going to worship if it's Yahweh of the Bible because I disagree with what he's done. And I think you would disagree with what he's done too if you're a decent person. Just the same way that if the devil shows up to you, you would probably disagree with him. I don't know why, because he hasn't done as much evil.
When you say what he's done, are you referring to like the Canaanite tribes? What are you referring to?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the Canaanite tribe. I'm talking about drowning everybody. I'm talking about
Let me ask you a question. If there was a country right now that you saw in the news was sacrificing their own children to gods, and the United States decided to go in there and take over, would you have a problem with that?
And kill all the rest of the remaining children? Yeah.
That's not really what happened. But I'm sure you've heard that argument before. That's not really what happened.
Wait. So, Jacob, do you have a problem with killing your own child?
Well, of course.
Okay, because I know that's what Yahweh is famous for, right? Jesus, he gave his only beloved son so that, that's how the whole Christian...
The whole entire planet.
But, right, so his child got sacrificed.
Right, he made a human sacrifice, basically, and that was his whole setup, right? He could have made any plan he wanted, and his plan was a human sacrifice.
Well, because right, but obviously God knows that Jesus is God. Jesus is God incarnate. It's not like he's losing his son.
So maybe the
So he
Canaanites.
didn't lose his son. Well, there's a new spin on the Christian.
So maybe the
narrative.
Canaanites knew something when they were doing their.
What do you mean that's a new spin?
Because most people say that God gave his only son. In fact, that's a quote almost from the Bible.
But Jesus is God incarnate.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
According to Christians, does Jesus still exist? According to the Christian faith?
Yes, they say he still exists. So what you're basically saying is that there was no sacrifice now. Now your argument is that nothing was really sacrificed because nobody died.
He suffered. No, he suffered and died on the cross, but was he not resurrected?
They're saying that he was resurrected, which kind of negates the sacrifice, right? So nobody died.
Well, I just
negate the sacrifice.
Because there wasn't one. If you're still alive, you didn't die.
Jacob, I just wanted to just to point out that if.
Well, wait a minute. But hold on. I just want to confirm what you just said. So you just said that he didn't die because he was resurrected from the dead.
Did he ever really die? According to the Christians, did he cease to exist at any point?
No.
Okay, so then he didn't die.
God.
Right, so there was no death.
The idea would be, and I'm sure you've heard of this, is the idea of hypostatic union. So Jesus has two natures. He's fully human, and at the same time, he's full deity.
But Jacob, a lot of people.
You can't be 100% human and 100% deity unless humans are deities.
A lot of people, even in the Bible, have resurrected. So even Jesus resurrecting is not a unique or thing, because that was.
That reminds me of that drink that's like something like nothing but lemonade or something like that, and now they've got nothing but lemonade with cranberry. Like, it makes no sense.
What's interesting? What's interesting is that you guys are ready to admit that you don't know everything about science, but when it comes to theology, you that's not something you're.
No, I'm totally willing to say that a lot of this stuff makes no sense to me, and I don't understand it. And I'm just saying that when other people explain it, it doesn't make sense either.
So it's like, okay, right, but
okay, yeah, right.
Does that mean that it's not true because you don't understand it?
No, but when somebody says something that's impossible, that would be not true.
Okay.
I can't say that this piece of fruit in my. I can't say that I have a piece of fruit that is 100% apple and 100% orange. That piece of fruit doesn't exist.
That's not a good analogy. Jesus was fully God and fully man at the same time. So two separate natures.
You said he was 100% human and 100% God. That was exactly what you said.
Yeah, it should be fully man, fully God. 100%. I shouldn't have said that. So it's fully man, fully God.
Well, what if I said I'm fully man, I'm fully God?
Excuse me.
Well, you can say that. That's irrelevant, though. The point is that.
Why is it irrelevant?
Christianity.
Wait a minute. Why is it irrelevant?
Because that's not part of the conversation. And he can deify himself if he wants. I don't see how that's relevant to the conversation.
I think he just did.
We're talking about the same thing.
No,
I just made a statement. I'm 100%. I'm fully God and I'm fully man. So therefore.
Okay, great.
You're going to worship me?
I don't know.
Because you can see me. I've actually taken my time to show up to the atheist experience. You see me, unlike Yahweh, and you're not going to give me my just dues? So, that's 10% of your income, by the way.
I don't understand how that. Yeah, that doesn't apply to Christians. But I don't understand how that's a relevant point.
It's relevant because I'm here. You're talking to me.
I don't understand how any of this is relevant because we're supposed to be talking about evidence for a creator.
Okay, you left that eyebrow space for him.
Okay, right. So let me get to that point then. Do you guys think that there's any evidence at all for outside of any religion? So forget about talking specific religions. Just the idea that there's a creative being that put everything together. Do you think there's any evidence for that at all?
I see no evidence for it.
No, I do not.
You see no evidence for a creator?
Yes, that's what I just said.
Wow, that's amazing. So complex biology, the systems in the universe, that absolutely doesn't move you at all in terms of that.
No, and it doesn't move biologists and it doesn't move cosmologists either.
None of them. You can make that statement. There's no Christian biologist.
No, I'm not saying I'm saying that their knowledge of biology is not being put forward as some sort of published paper trying to demonstrate God's hand. So they don't see God's hand in it enough to actually try and assert that on a professional level. So as far as
plenty of them do, though. There's plenty of Christian biologists that write thesis data. There's plenty of that.
Yeah, they tried it in Dover. They tried it in Dover, where they put those papers on trial, and they found that it was just creationism dressed up to try and get it into a classroom. That there was really nothing. There was no validity to this. And in fact, other people in biology reject those ideas, such as irreducible complexity, right? If you go and look up the peer response to it, you're not going to find that this is the consensus of biologists. In fact, it's a minority fringe view.
Or we can do this. I'm here. I have some water in my cup. Can you ask the creator to create some wine right now?
Well, before we move on, I just want to say that if the scientists themselves are not publishing and saying, hey, it's our consensus that the field of biology demonstrates the hand of God, or it's our consensus that the field of cosmology demonstrates the hand of God, then you shouldn't be amazed when someone says, I don't see the hand of God in this stuff.
What you're saying right now is a dishonest argument. There's been scientists from Einstein to current day biologists and medical that assert that the complexity of biology and the universe is absolutely and obviously evidence for a creator.
And yet they can't convince the broad field of biologists that there's anything to it, and they're, for the most part, not even trying, right?
But if
it's that obvious, why aren't they just writing it down in terms that their peers can understand and that they can then be convinced that this shows the hand of God? This is not hard. This is how if you're a biologist and you're convinced of something that biology is demonstrating, that's the thing you do, right? You put forward a peer-reviewed paper and you make that argument and you let people assess it and criticize it. And when that's done, those arguments don't fly.
They don't fly in your mind.
No, they don't fly in the fields in which they're being suggested by the fringe people.
You outside or something? He outside pacing in the yard. He got his ass sweating.
No, it's not dishonest at all. There is nothing about consensus of biology that dictates that there's a God. And there's nothing about the consensus of cosmology that concludes that there's a God.
No one's saying that it's conclusive evidence for a God.
No, I'm not saying conclusive. I'm saying consensus. The scientists themselves do not hold that this is a demonstrated fact based on their fields.
No, you're only going to give it. You're only going to see it as legitimate. There's a consensus.
Yes.
That's your standard.
That should be everyone's standard.
Consensus that what you believe is true.
Holy cow! If a thing is not consensus, what you're basically saying is that the majority of people in the field, the majority of experts in this field do not believe this is a correct thing. And so when they're the experts in the field and they're validating this information and they're looking at the information and the evidence that's presented and they're saying, we don't think that this is the proper conclusion, that the person who wrote this paper, the conclusion that they're making or trying to make is not demonstrated by this evidence. There's problems with this paper. They're evaluating it based on professional expertise and the capacity to evaluate it. And they're saying in the majority that this is not evidence for a God. And so for you to act like I'm somehow amazing that I don't accept biology as evidence for God when the majority of biologists and the field of biology does not put it forward.
But I'm not talking about biology being evidence for God. I'm talking about biology being evidence for
a creator,
an indicator.
A creator. And they have not put this forward. This is not consensus. Biology does not say this. It doesn't promote it. It's not part of biology.
So you're saying
you need a better argument than look at biology.
You're saying that the systems that cause your body to function, that work together, along with the systems in the universe that create an environment where this same body can thrive in.
No, it didn't create an environment in which this body can thrive. This is the puddle, man. We were just talking about this with another caller.
Okay, so
this is the puddle.
So the environment that you live in, that if it were any different, you probably wouldn't survive.
Then I would be different. I would be different, and we'd be having this conversation, and I would be different.
Okay, so
but the point is that people who study the fields and are expert in the fields that you are invoking do not accept your conclusion based on their knowledge of the field.
A growing number of them do.
No, I don't care about their personal beliefs. My plumber can be a Christian. It doesn't mean that plumbing demonstrates God.
No, I'm talking about people that actually study these things.
Right, they are not putting their money where their mouth is. They are not trying to present evidence to convince their peers to change the consensus of their field to say that it demonstrates a God. I don't even know what else to say about it. I mean, man, I'm dropping this call. I don't know how else to explain this. I mean, for somebody to just keep telling me, but biology, it's like, yeah, and biologists have not come out with, as far as I know, there is no professional association of biologists that puts forward that biology demonstrates a God exists or that it is evidence for a creator. I don't know of any, valid peer-reviewed group of biologists who puts forward that this is demonstrated in their field. This is totally different than whether or not they personally believe a God exists. You can personally believe a God exists, and you can see God in, your toast or in a cell or a baby's face. But the fact is, unless you have consensus in the field of expert peers that this is really what we're looking at here, you don't get to just go around telling other people that that's how they have to look at it. Let the experts look at it that way. And if you think they should, then talk to them about it. Write your paper. Get it published. I mean, I just saw this thing about a little girl who was I think she was 11 or 12, and she got her first paper published in JAMA, right? So you don't even have to have the requisite degrees. She did a study on, touch healing or something like that. This wasn't a recent thing. It was in a book that I was reading on management, actually. But it dealt with the idea of evidence and testing and measurability. It was talking about how you can measure intangibles. And so they talked about this study that the little girl did and how simple it is to sometimes to measure a thing that sounds like it's complicated. And she did this little study, but she was just a child and she published in JAMA. It's like, if you really want to prove it, if you really think you're seeing it and you think that experts in the field need to see it, not just on a personal level, but a professional, let them put their credentials on this. And some of them do. There are papers published on irreducible complexity and they get shredded by the community of peers. You don't see the community of peers saying, wow, we never thought of this before. This is completely convincing. Or even, we should look into this more because this is definitely something going on here. You don't even see that. You just see blanket criticism.
Let's get to Matt in Oslo, Norway, who has called 3 weeks in a row right at the end of the show, and I apologize we hadn't got him on. Matt, you're on now.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Thanks for waiting 3 weeks or more.
The first week you hung up on me, then I called in too late the second week, and now I'm finally there, and you're not going to slip away this time. Yeah, man. Well, I got you the hook now, yeah.
I have the control box for the phone in front of me, so I'm not sure who's got who on the hook. But
let's have some fun.
Let's enjoy it. What's up?
I have Oreo. Let's talk.
Okay, Matt. So
about some prison reform or some shit.
Is bullshit, and so food creation is now once and for all.
Hang on. Do you have a Nobel Prize to go with that proof? Do you have a PhD in biology to go with that proof?
I don't need it.
Do you have scientific papers that you have written and published to go with that proof?
Martin, come on.
No, I mean, it's like you're coming on the show, and right out of the gate, you're claiming that you can show that a foundational pillar of biological science is bullshit. So yeah, I mean, can you demonstrate that you have any remote expertise or knowledge to make that claim?
Well, let's say this. You just admitted that it's an exaggeration. It's fine. I'm okay with some hyperbole. My question is the same one that I asked another caller last week, which is, let's say, for example, that you could, right now, disprove evolution. What difference does that make? My atheism is not contingent upon evolution being true.
No.
So what difference? Why would you call into an atheist show to try and disprove evolution? Because we're not biologists. We're not here to actually review anything. We're not experts on the subject of evolution. Anything we say here could just be incorrect. And even if you proved it wrong, it still doesn't prove that creationism is true.
Yeah. There's a few reasons, I suppose. The first one is that I've talked to many Christians and atheists, and many atheists say that the reason they can't believe the Bible is because it says that man was created, and then evolution totally goes against that, you know? So that's a big reason, I suppose, and if evolution actually was proven wrong, then more people would become Christian, maybe.
Well, then they'd have really bad reasons for it. I mean, there may be people who say, I can't believe Christianity because the Bible says people are created, but that's only one of many things that are wrong with Christianity, not the least of which is you can't demonstrate that it's actually true.
Well, I can demonstrate that it's true, and that's why I'm calling it here in the first place, you know?
Well, then, hey, I would suggest that you start with proving that your religious claims are true and not say, I'm here to disprove evolution.
Okay, well, I got evidence, like, for creationism as well. Like, I can start with that, you know?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so there's a specific animal I would like to talk about. And I think it's only logical if it came from creationism, you know?
You know?
And I got a few reasons for that. First of all, the physical appearance of the animal, like, it makes no sense, considering where it lives at, you know?
Well, which animal are you referring to?
I'm referring to Tasmanian tiger. You might want to Google that.
Thylacine? You talking about thylacine?
Yeah, thylacine.
Okay.
Okay, bye. If you look at this animal now, I hope you got a picture up on it. It looks like a dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it lives south of Australia. It looks like a wolf, you know, not a dog, like more like a wolf, you know. Like, and at the same time, it looks like a tiger, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the stripes. Now, this would only make sense in the regard of, you know, because, you know, it has no reason to look like a wolf, you know, because, you know, it's in Australia, you know, there's no native animals there that look like wolves, you know.
Well, isn't
thylacine a specific animal?
Hang on,
the only family of species, like, you know, it looks like that. It's really fishy, you know. I think that's actually creationism, you know.
So your argument about thylacine is that you think it is evidence for a creator simply because its appearance is not something that you can think of a better explanation for other than a creator. In other words, its appearance is baffling, and therefore you don't think it could have an evolutionary lineage. That's
yes.
basically your argument.
That's called an argument from ignorance fallacy.
I wouldn't say that, Matt.
I would.
Well, it is.
I mean, I'm just saying it is. Yeah. If you say, I think, that explanation A is true because it hasn't been proven false, that's argument from ignorance. In this case, what you're talking about is more about what Dawkins has referred to as the argument from personal incredulity, and that is, I don't see how any other explanation could be better. That's not the way science is done. That's not the way we get to reality. Is to say, I can't think of anything that fits this better, so I'm going with this. Well, okay. Maybe you just have a failure of imagination or education.
No. Wait. Okay, so it shouldn't like directly point towards creation, okay? Okay, that's a bit ignorant, I must say.
What about this points towards creationism? The fact that it looks like a couple of different animals, and you don't see how
that's like a couple of different animals. It's more of a, you know, a strange mixture. I don't think like.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions really quickly before we go on, and I promise I won't be a smartass. All right? Two questions that I have for you. First off,
the first stream showed up on me.
I'd like to get from you a definition of evolution.
So I was in there.
If I were to ask you, what is evolution?
Yeah, I was in there probably about 30 minutes.
How would you define that for me?
I had to start back over.
Well,
can you just tell me what it is? Can you?
Yeah. Okay, I think evolution is like the theory, because I don't think it's real science. I think that it's about the adaptation of species to, for example, climate changes and stuff like that, and Yeah, that's my definition of it, like adaptation, changes, and all that jazz, you know.
I'm sorry that you waited 3 weeks to come in and talk about something that you clearly don't understand.
Yeah. See, because when you stumble upon a basic definition like that, if you want to critique a science like evolution, which is a very well-founded, I mean, it's a cornerstone of modern sciences, that's fine. That's what science is all about, challenging, you know, the existing paradigm, knowledge, always looking for different answers, new answers, questioning what is thought to be true, et cetera, et cetera. That's great. But you need to, at the very least, have a sound grasp at a basic level of what it is you're claiming to be able to refute. Okay. And it should kind of start, it helps if you aren't just stumbling through a very basic definition of evolution, which can essentially be said to be changes in the frequency of genes, gene frequencies, allele frequencies in population groups over time. That's how scientists, that's how biologists define evolution. Okay.
They're trying to get you scared
now,
when you don't need that shit.
So you need to know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about in general.
I have really good reasons for thinking that this whole scientific theory
laced with LSD
is not well founded. And here are my results based on my understanding.
Yeah. See, here's the other thing is,
and you don't have that.
Let's say that you did actually understand what evolution was.
And I do. Yeah.
No, you don't. You just demonstrated. You could not give a clear definition of the science, of the theory. You couldn't do that just now.
And you started with, it's a theory, not a fact, which demonstrates that you don't understand the basics of science. Because facts are things that are explained by theories. Theories are the graduation point of ideas in science.
Okay, Matt.
Facts are inferior. Facts are just observations.
Okay, Matt, but then why does America, like 4 out of 10 Americans, only accept evolution?
Because they're poorly educated.
Them are poorly educated.
We have a very bad education, and this leads to the second question that I had for you, Matt.
Okay.
The second question that I had for you, and the first one was, asking for the definition. In America, we have almost half the people here. Yes, they do reject evolution. Why? Because we have a very poor educational system in this country. And it keeps getting worse, okay? We have conservative politicians out there who defund education. We have a guy in the state next door, Bobby Jindal, governor of Louisiana, who really wants to miseducate children over there. He has a voucher program that will allow people to get state money to send their kids to religious schools where they will learn that the Loch Ness Monster disproves evolution. So maybe you guys and the Loch Ness Monster people can get together on your dueling refutations and hammer it all out. But my question to you is, in contrast to America, okay, over in Norway, you guys have really good science education. You guys have a really good educational system. You've got something like 98% adult literacy. It's barely 60% here in America. You have really good schools.
Yeah.
So how did creationism get its hooks into you? Right? I mean, why would somebody from a culture like yours accept something as completely cockamamie as creationism when you've had access to a much better science education than just about any American in a public school over here?
Well, I actually have some doubts about non-beliefs right now. Like, I recently got that. Actually, there's not, like, there are other creationists as well in Norway. Like, I'm not the only one, even if you make it sound like that. And
no, but what I'm saying is, in America, at least people have the excuse of having bad schools and a heavily religious culture to influence them away from getting a sound science education. You don't really have that excuse over in Norway. So I'm just curious why this was more attractive to you than being able to learn the facts, which you're able to do, and you have with the good schools and the good education that you have.
I think he already told us why it's more attractive to him. He looks at something like the thylacine. He doesn't understand evolution. And
not only that, I also listen to Kent Hovind and Eric Hovind and Paul Taylor.
I haven't finished talking. I'm sure you've been influenced by a bunch of buffoons who don't understand science. A bunch of people who are polluting this. So basically what you're saying is the idiots from America that have been poisoning the mind of our people have made their way to Norway. I understand. You've already explained you don't understand evolution, and you look at something like thylacine, and without even bothering to investigate it, you take a cursory glance at it and say, creationism explains this better than my lack of understanding of evolution. You know what? You know why creationism seems to explain it better, even though it doesn't explain a thing? It's because magic works as an explanation for anything. It doesn't actually explain a thing. In order to explain something, we tend to explain things in terms of other things that we already know. Creationism is an attempt to explain the mystery of the diversity of life by appealing to a bigger mystery. There's no explanatory power there. It is indistinguishable from its magic. And that's why, hey, I just did a coin trick for you. You don't know how I could have possibly done that with my fingers, therefore, magic explains it. Well, I'm sorry that you have a failure of imagination and a failure of investigation. Maybe you could actually go study thylacines and thylacine history. Where you've been and actually like gone out and done the research on thylacine DNA and morphology and things like that?
Conversion evolution?
I mean, where did you do this? Because I don't think thylacine's in Norway. Did you go to Australia?
No, you don't need to like go and see them. I mean, they're extinct, by the way. Like
I'm aware of that, and so are their ancestors that would offer you the evolutionary explanation that you don't seem to want to grasp.
Okay, Matt, I'll admit. Okay, this is a bad example. Okay, and
well, why would you?
Okay, well, I think I'll agree with that one, but
you'll agree what?
I'll agree that it probably isn't creationism then, if you're going to put it like that.
Okay, so you call up to say that you're going to disprove evolution, and then we actually explain why that's pointless, and then you tell us that you can prove creationism, and your first example is thylacine, which you now admit is a bad example. So are you done believing creationism? I mean, did you come in with like your 10th best argument? Because I'd recommend that in a short format show, you come in with your best argument. So what is your best argument for creationism?
Well, it's a bit personal, you know. I don't have any empirical evidence. You know, faith is like you don't need evidence. You have faith. You believe in something, you know, just to believe it. So yeah. I guess I don't have any, you know, real evidence I can provide you, but.
Okay.
Okay, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks. I hope that you realize that this lack of evidence probably means that you're believing something without a good reason. Because faith is not a pathway to truth. Faith is the excuse people give when they don't have a good reason. Now, if creationism is true, shouldn't we be able to have good reasons for it?
Yeah.
Well, so find those good reasons and call us back.
Wait. I wanted to talk about something more.
No.
Yeah.
No, we got a short show.
We have an hour show. We got more guys to get on to.
Talk about something more when you come back with more. Thanks.
Sorry, Matt.
That last sentence of mine made less sense than what he was talking about.
Talk about some more when you come back with more. Wait. I want to talk about something else. No, we got a short show today. Call back.
No, well, hang on. You asked if we had any example of something coming from nothing. No.
Correct. As far as you know, in any kind of scientific history, has that ever happened?
No.
Nope, including God. Have you ever had an example of a supernatural being who creates universes out of nothing and personally listens to the lives of every single one of the 6 billion people on Earth and either just came from nothing or was always there?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. That's what science is saying.
Okay. No, we don't have an example of anything coming from nothing.
Correct, and then that's great because that's what the Big Bang Theory is saying.
No, it's not. If you can say that, you don't understand the Big Bang Theory.
Well, I understand the scientific method, and the first part is observation. And you can't prove it to be a fact unless you observe it. Now,
yeah, but
if you don't take the historical accuracy of the Bible,
okay.
Throw out every history book
ever
written.
Stop. Hang on. You're going down this really common bad road of absolutes. Oh, you can't prove anything that you can't have seen or witnessed. The orbital period of the former planet Pluto is 200 and some odd years. Yet we have not known about Pluto's existence or observed it long enough to know that it actually takes that long to go around. We haven't even been able to observe it for one full rotation yet, and yet we know what its orbital period is. We don't have to observe the whole thing. And
well, I'm just
right,
throwing back with the scientific method.
Yeah, but you are misunderstanding, because you're throwing out this claim that what science says is if you don't personally witness something, then you can't say it happened, and that's just not true.
That's not the scientific method.
I mean,
I must be reading a different scientific method.
Apparently, you are. You should stop reading science books by creationists.
See, if you the thing is that what you're doing is committing a logical fallacy, because the observation is that the universe exists. We've made that observation, and now we're going to see if we can find out what the explanation for this is. Your method, where you're saying that you have to have observed the universe beginning,
no, it's not
that
my method. That's the
leapfrogs.
scientific method. The scientists are the ones that are saying it's a fact.
No, I'm sorry.
Saying what's a fact?
Well, you name it, evolution.
Evolution is a fact. Change over time is a fact.
Well, I've never seen any transitional forms.
Well, then you haven't
looked for them.
TopOrigins.org. The only reason you haven't seen this stuff is because you haven't looked, or because you're disregarding them. Because what happens is every time, let's say in the process from man and our common ancestor with apes, every time you've got the two, you find an early one, and they say, look at that big gap in between there. And then you find a transitional form, and it goes here, and the creationist says, nope, that's either a human or an ape. And then they also say, and now you've got 2 more gaps. So you fill in those gaps, and you've got 4 gaps. And then they go through, basically you could line up a progression from the common ancestor that we share with modern apes to today's human, a process of skulls of everyone that's ever lived. And a creationist would walk along there and go, ape, 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 man. And that's absurd. They're denying the bigger picture.
One of my favorite pages on Talk Origins, for example, is this page which has all these skulls that you're talking about, and then they list what all the creationists say about them. You know, some of them say they're apes, and some of them say they're people, but right around the middle of it, they can't agree. They get exactly like a 50-50 split of the people who are looking at them. Half of them say, that's definitely an ape, and half of them say, that's definitely a person.
But why are there still apes?
Because we didn't come from apes. Man and apes share a common ancestor.
Right. If Americans came from Europeans, then why are there still Europeans?
Okay.
If bald people, you know, it's...
Well, everything, in my opinion, points to intelligent design.
Really? Like what? Like the fact that I have one tube, which I use for breathing and food, so that I can choke to death and suffocate? That's really stupid design.
Well, okay. For every example you have of that, there's another one for it. I mean, the human eye.
But I mean, isn't the God?
Even the most single-celled organism contains tons of data. It all points to intelligent design.
Nothing points to intelligent design, which is why the intelligent design folks aren't providing any evidence. They're lobbying.
Okay, and ultimately we all end up in the same place.
In the ground.
Correct?
In the ground.
Yep.
So Hitler and Mother Teresa are in the same exact place right now.
Yes. Why do you think that there should be this kind of cosmic justice, and why do you think Mother Teresa is a particularly good person?
I'm personally fine with Hitler being in the ground because.
Wait a
minute. I'm personally hold it. How do you get to heaven under your system of belief?
Love and serve mankind, and love and worship God.
Well, that's okay. So basically, as long as you take the God stuff seriously and worship God, then you go to heaven regardless of your actions. Isn't that right?
No,
according to Protestantism,
there's 2 parts. It's to love and serve mankind as well.
That's not what I've heard from other apologists, including one of my favorite.
What if I spend my whole life loving and serving mankind, but I don't love and worship that God that you claim exists? Am I going to hell?
I would say definitely not.
Oh, you would? Okay, then we're clear.
Then I'll say the same thing I said last week. If that's the case, and belief in God is not a requirement, and your thing is that you just need to love and work for the good of humanity, then you have a useless God. You have a useless God. If God isn't required, if I can live my life and not believe in him and do whatever as long as I'm doing good things and I go to heaven, then your God isn't required and he's useless. It's a concept.
No, if he's the ultimate judge, there's no way to determine what's right or from wrong. And if you say society dictates what's right and what's wrong,
are we talking about the same God who? Are we talking about the same God who once ordered armies of soldiers to go to neighboring towns and slaughter everybody except the young women so they could take them as their unwilling wives?
Yeah, we're talking about the same God that.
So that's the guy who gives you your ultimate sense of right and wrong.
So you're gonna look at the things that you consider to be good bits, like love thy neighbor and thou shalt not kill, and ignore that this God supposedly sent people out to kill entire towns and keep the virgins for themselves.
Well, that's why the Bible is in two parts. You have the Old Testament, where God does appear.
So
to
but the Old Testament is in the Ten Commandments are in the Old Testament.
Right, and Jesus Christ is not.
Right.
And
so throw out the Ten Commandments.
For our sins, to me, kind of separates.
Okay, so that God who ordered this mass slaughter and rape was the same guy, but he changed his mind.
Well, I'm not familiar with the raping thing that you mentioned.
Do you have some stuff? Or you probably can't look up in time.
There's no guarantee, but I mean, if you slaughter an entire town and take 32,000 virgins, you don't think that they had sex with them? Regardless, who cares if they raped them? They went and killed everybody and kept the virgins. Do you think that is morally good?
For the express purpose of taking those virgins.
Do you think that is morally good?
Oh, absolutely not.
Then how can you
into the picture?
But it's God that ordered that action, and you're saying that Jesus is God. So basically you're saying that sometime at this dividing point between an Old Testament and a New Testament, this asshole, evilly, morally bankrupt God suddenly turned into this love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek God.
You're kind of getting it.
Yeah.
I would agree. Yeah.
I'd suggest that if you accept that, and you can disregard that your God was an immoral monster, and just latch onto the new stuff, you're morally bankrupt as well. And if you actually read and study what's in the New Testament, these concepts that Jesus brings forward, there's an idea of eternal suffering and torture in exchange for a finite crime, which is by definition infinitely more morally corrupt than killing a town full of people. So your Jesus is no better, and you've used up way too much of our time talking about 30 different freaking issues. Visit talkorigins.org, get some information. Visit infidels.org, learn a little bit more. Read your Bible.
The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.
But I just wanted to say, how do you handle, what if you're wrong, knowing how the Christians believe what the consequences really are? Like, it's mind-blowing to me only because I've had my own personal experiences, so God is, definitely real, and it's just amazing. The more I believe, the more he shows me. But then I say, wow, the consequences are real for me. How do you handle that? Or what do you say about that? What if you're wrong?
If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. The big thing is there's, obviously you have a belief, and so there's a presumption that there's some risk on my part.
Right.
From where I sit, I'm risking being wrong about every religion, and you're risking being wrong about every religion except yours. And
right.
I don't know how much time you've spent worrying about other religions' heavens or hells, but I don't think it's probably very high. And I don't spend any time worrying about anybody's heavens or hells. I live my life. I have sincerely and honestly pursued these things. I used to be a believer. I've looked around, and if it turns out that I die and I'm still alive in some sense, and there was a God, I'd have to know. I can't really answer it because I'd have to know a lot more about that. So the first thing is there'd be a lot of questions. Any God that wants to condemn me to eternal torment and suffering, well, I can't do anything to stop them. But if they're willing to do that, knowing who I am and what kind of life I've led and how I honestly followed the evidence, as far as I can tell, it's their fault that I don't know they exist. And if they want to punish me for that, then they're a moral thug, and I'll be happy to live, in eternal anguish knowing that I'm morally superior to them.
Okay, no, I accept that. I wouldn't even know what to say to that, and I wouldn't want to argue with you, but okay. I'm praying for you guys. I just hope that, you see the light, at least just reconsider maybe at some point. But thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Sure. I reconsider all the time, and I'll tell you this, because this is kind of what I told my parents, and that's, you may be in a similar position, and that's, they believe that there's a God. They believe that God is real. They believe that God answers prayer. They believe that God wants me to know that he exists. And so what I told them was, okay, pray that God reveals himself to me, because if that happens, I'm not going to deny it. But until it does, I'm not going to be, persuaded by emotional appeals and other people's claims about their experiences, because I have no way of verifying them. And, to me, it's a big question as to why, why is Saul deserving of a Damascus Road experience, but the rest of us are just kind of, take it on faith. I can't do that. And what I can say is, well, I don't know what would convince me. If there is a God, that God absolutely knows what would convince me, and it should be capable of doing it, and yet for some reason hasn't done it. Now that reason could be that he doesn't exist, or it could be that there's some other plan that I'm not privy to. But until such time as it happens, I'm not going to change my mind just because maybe there could. I don't even know how people determined it was possible that there could be a God.
Well, for me, I was a non-believer for so many years, and then fell into some, sickness and not feeling good and anxious, and I finally gave up and said, I can't take it anymore, so let me start praying, and I asked other people to pray, and I will tell you, not instantaneously, but after 5 years, I not only began to see miracles, I was healed. He started to reveal himself more and more, to the point where I know him like I know my name is Lisa.
Well, I hear healed.
So I know people aren't with me in that because everybody's experience is different, but I just now know that
then
the
on
more
top
you
of that,
believe,
like,
or the more
there's
you ask him to reveal himself,
tons of people
he
who
definitely
lost
will.
their leg or their arm, and they can pray to God all they want to grow my arm back. So how can you heal cancer or heal leukemia or heal these other ailments that we can't really see is damaging your body?
Do you believe that there's a
But
Satan?
like clear evidence that your leg is no longer there. You can pray to God all you want and your leg isn't going to grow back. It has never happened for anybody. That would be a fucking miracle. Now, having cancer, having breast cancer and going through chemo and all these experimental drugs and praying at the same time, and it's like, well, God healed me. Well, what about all the other people who died from cancer?
And you're right. I didn't think of that,
prayed
but I definitely will
harder
do that.
than you
I will
did.
ask him and say,
Why didn't God
why
save
do
him?
I know and why can't they know? Why does somebody leave the church or leave, having a foundation in Christianity? How come he can't be where I am? Yeah, I would definitely do that. I think that's a good point.
If he answers you, call back and let me know what he says.
I will, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks, Lisa.
And I know him like I know my name is Lisa.
What limits do atheists have?
Well, what culture? Tell me one culture that doesn't have limits. And there's every culture on the face of the earth has limits, and they're not Christian cultures. Chinese culture has got limits. Japanese, the most secular country in the world is Japan. They have the lowest rape rate. Denmark, Sweden, they're very unreligious places, and they don't have any rape problem. We have much more rape in the United States
and by the
than
way,
they ever do in Denmark or Sweden.
Religion doesn't seem to be any kind of deterrent to rape. Are you implying that all rapists are non-Christians or non-religious? What about the priests who are raping little boys and little girls?
Little boys, little girls.
Where do you get your limits from?
I get my limits from a rational consideration of the consequences of my actions. That's how I determine what's moral. I get it from a foundation that says my actions have an effect on those people around me, and theirs have an effect on me. And if we're going to live cooperatively and share space, we have to recognize that impact. And my freedom to swing my arm ends at their nose, and that I have no right to impose my will over somebody else's will in that type of scenario. That's where I get them from. It's from an understanding.
What's the punishment if you do that, then?
I get them
You're just gonna die.
Andrew, I get them from an understanding of reality, not an assertion of authority. Now, what was the question?
Well, if you just do all that, let's just say you go out with a gun and you just rape a bunch of people, then you just shoot yourself, what's going to be the punishment for you?
If I go out and rape a bunch of people and shoot myself, what's going to be the punishment for me? I'll be dead. Yeah. I'll be dead.
It's not going to hurt. The bullet's going to go through your head in about a second. There isn't going to be any pain.
That's correct. And I'll be dead. Okay, so let's flip the script here. Let's say somebody goes around and rapes and murders somebody, and then after they're done, they get saved. What's the punishment for them?
Oh, man. The punishment is hell.
No, they got
They
saved.
got saved. Also,
Are you saying that a rapist can't be saved? See, this is the problem. This is the problem with Christian religion. It establishes unrealistic and irrational and immoral criteria by which to live. And then it creates a loophole so that you don't ever have to be responsible for those actions. No, Andrew, shut up till I'm done. Christianity is not a moral system. It is an immoral system because it specifically says that there aren't necessarily consequences that you're going to have to pay because of a loophole. And what is the loophole? It has nothing to do with how good you are or how morally you act or anything else. It has to do with whether or not you're willing to be a sycophant to an idea. And if you are, then there is now an exception for which you no longer have to suffer a penalty for this. So the idea that secular morality offers no guarantee that people will ever pay for their crimes and their atrocities is not an argument against secular morality, because that is a tenet of Christianity. It is the foundation. The idea that the Christian God is just is directly contradicted by the idea that the Christian God is merciful. Perfect justice and any mercy are necessarily directly in contradiction, because mercy is a suspension of justice. So do not pretend that your religion is moral and just and then try to attack my position, which is based on reality, because somebody might rape people, shoot themselves ahead, and then not get punished. That's asinine.
If religion is such a bad thing, how come you think, I don't know how many atheists are there in the United States? How come everyone isn't just an atheist then?
Because not everybody is aware of how bad and untrue religion is, which is one of the reasons why.
You think you're some kind of genius or something?
Actually, yeah, but
figured this out, everyone else is too dumb to figure it out?
No, it's not a matter of too dumb. You see, I was a Christian for 25 plus years.
Let me ask you a question. Why are you calling in as a Christian? Why didn't you call in as a Muslim, a Buddhist, or a Hindu?
Because my parents raised me as a Christian.
So you didn't have a choice, did you? When did you choose to be a Christian?
Well, it's just a tradition. Your parents teach you whatever religion they do. So if you were born over in Afghanistan, you'd be a Muslim.
Yeah,
if you were born a Muslim.
So it has nothing to do with truth then. It's just the way you were raised. See, because on this show we actually care about whether or not things are true. And my genius status is completely irrelevant because I was a Christian for 25 plus years. I did not get smarter when I became an atheist. What happened was I gained more information. I became more knowledgeable about subjects. And I decided to actually care whether or not my beliefs were true. You don't seem to care whether or not your beliefs are true. You just like them because you were born here.
Well, I think it's good. I think you're going to have more happiness in your life if you have limits to tell you what you can do or...
how is that relevant to the truth of your religion? I've
it's
already
not
said.
All true. I know. I was talking to people on the chat here, and they said, "Well, they're read the Old Testament. There's all this genocide and stuff." And I was just saying, well, you don't have to read the whole thing because you just read, for example, what Jesus said.
Okay. So are you saying? I tell you what, we already talked about this earlier. Not everything that Jesus said is true or good or smart or wise either. So why would you care at all what any of them have to say? You're not concerned about truth. You've already just said you can pick and choose and toss aside the things you don't like. So you're inventing your own version of Christianity So why not just chuck it aside and go ahead and invent your own secular moral system? You don't keep talking about how we don't have limits. I have plenty of limits. And we live in a society that has plenty of limits. As Daryl's already pointed out, most societies have limits. You keep going to this slippery slope thing of, well, if there is no, 10 Commandments or Jesus or whatever, then you've got no limits. You'll just run around raping and killing people. Well, that's already demonstrably false. And there have been multiple studies that actually investigate the correlation between the religiosity of a society and its societal health. And there is always a strong negative correlation. The more atheistic the society, the better they score on societal health factors, from everything from teenage pregnancy rates to STDs to happiness to wealth to murder, rape to healthcare. Now, go out and do some actual research that contradicts this, and then you might have a case for your assertion that I think you'll live a better life if you're. No, you won't. There's no evidence to demonstrate this. This is wishful thinking. Just as not only have you gone and said, well, I'll pick and choose what I want, you've done it in a way where you're just trying to support your own wishful thinking. And until you actually come up with evidence and until you demonstrate that you care about the truth, we don't really need to waste any more time on it. And I guess we won't. Consciousness? No? You don't? Well, tell me how this happened. I don't know. I'm not convinced any of us know. You're the one claiming to have an answer. Would you like to provide the evidence and the argument to support your actual answer? And if I find it compelling, then I'll agree with you. But my lack of an answer doesn't make your answer correct. This is the mindset of the creationists that go through and try to poke holes in evolution. And even if they poke holes so much that evolution ceased to be a concrete theory, they're not one step closer to proving creationism is true. And man, they got mad. By the third night, I think, Israel, the gentleman I was debating, said, well, every time...
All right, still working my way through what's behind these pickets right here. And so just got a little bit more to step, and there's another little set of flower pots that's sitting on the pickets. And then I'll work on the pickets themselves, and that'll be the whole canvas with 2 layers of paint on it. And after that second layer is completely done, and then I'll start back over, and hopefully the third layer I can just run right through it, because all the colors are basically there. And really just blend in the skin a little bit more, add some more highlights to the background, the house, the rocking chair on the porch, brighten it up a little bit, brighten up the white on all the pickets and the lattice work down here, add a little bit more lighter greens and yellows to the trees in the background, and it should be done. So I'm looking at maybe less than a week or so maybe, and I'll have this piece done, dried and ready to get shipped out. And then we'll start back on some of my own projects from there. Appreciate everybody watching this morning. And I'll get with you guys next time. Peace.